That's where I stand for the time being. And we will get back to this as we get deeper into the debate. George, I am sorry that we had to start without you. I understood you had a problem, a technical problem. I gather you're back with us now, and I can let you know so far that we have Richard, who is against the death penalty, and he has given a number of reasons. It is not within man's premise to take life. The death penalty is not a deterrent, and the capital punishment is inhumane. While I'm passing, I'll tell you one thing, Richard. I agree with it is not a deterrent, but it is not referred to as the death deterrent. It is the death penalty. It does not have to be a deterrent. You have committed a crime, and you pay the commensurate price for it. It does not have to be a deterrent. It is a penalty which you pay after having committed your crime. And we have Clyde, George, who thinks that war is the only justifiable reason for people to kill, and he thinks that there could be the error in judgment, and therefore he stands against the death penalty. So that is where we are so far, and I'm sure more will come. But George, we will now pause and give you your chance to state where you stand on the matter.
Well, it's unfortunately I didn't hear all the comments from the guests that we have tonight. However, John, I came in when you was giving your submission, and it's in times like this I wish I had some knowledge of all the major doctrine, some knowledge of the doctrines of the major religions, such as Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, and even Judaism, because most cases when topics like these come up, people often quote from what the doctrine said. Having said that, when a state enacts legislation, unless that state is a state that is not divorced from religion, then the state has to look into what that major religion is in that state. For instance, states like Saudi Arabia and so. In countries like ours, in Trinidad and Tobago here, there is a separation of church and state. So sometimes there can be no one view of a particular religion when enacting legislation. And sometimes when we quote from the Bible or the Gita or the Quran, we do it sometimes from a personal point of view, and sometimes we forget that we live in a plural society. And now, I am not dismissing what you said from the Bible. I'm just trying to say that in the country and around the Caribbean, everyone does not use the Bible as their religious and moral guide. They have other religions, right? That's all I'm saying to you in response. So I'm not saying what you said is wrong or so. However, what I want to look at tonight, abolish the death penalty, but replace it with what? What shall we replace it with? What good is the death penalty? What is the benefits of abolishing the death penalty? Now, you know what I always say? If I don't commit in our countries like ours, many countries in the West, the death penalty only applies to murder. And in some cases, first-degree murder, not even second-degree murder. And Richard will take me up on this and tell me if I'm wrong. But countries like China, Iran, Iraq, and some in the Middle East, there are other types of crimes that you can face the death penalty for. Things like blasphemy. In China, things like corruption, and so on. You can face the death penalty for crimes like these. And later on, we will get into see how many countries today abolish the death penalty for crimes other than murder, right? The death penalty, as it stands here around the Caribbean, we have not. It's quite a while we have not carried out the death penalty because a number of reasons is for that. We assign to a number of charters and treaties around the world, and sometimes what you have is legal submission, legal issues coming up that you can see a stay of execution for one reason or another, and this will go on, and that is why again you have something called the Pratt and Morgan situation that said if a man is on death row for after 5 years, you will violate his rights if he's now executed. So, and a lot of people have escaped the.
I think we have lost George. Yes, okay. He was just talking about the Pratt and Morgan bit. Richard, would you like to comment on that? Is that Pratt and Morgan still valid?
And what? Sorry, what is it?
The Pratt and Morgan situation.
Yes,
when
Pratt and Morgan, yes.
Is that? I see. I think recently I've been hearing that it does not avail in Barbados. I'm not sure about that. I would leave that to you. You are on that area.
As far as I am aware, it still obtains, but with every case that goes to the Privy Council, you get a fresh interpretation.
Yes.
And I must say that with every hearing and interpretation, there's a whittling away of the mandatory nature of the death penalty. Yes?
I see. Okay. Okay, George, are you with us again? Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yes. Okay. Right. Well, that bit he was talking about the Pratt and Morgan bit.
George was also making a very, very interesting point in that our discussion this evening is about whether or not the death penalty should be abolished.
Yes.
Not whether people should be put to death for taking life. And the point that George was making, which I concur with, is that even in the local jurisdictions, the Caribbean jurisdictions, the offense of treason, for example, carries with it the death penalty.
Yes.
So even where someone commits an act of treason as against the state without necessarily taking the life of another, they could be liable to have the death penalty imposed upon them. That's one aspect of what he was saying. The other aspect that he touched on, which I think is quite relevant, is the designation of categories of homicide into first degree, second degree, third degree. As a corollary to that, we have the issue of the defenses to murder.
Oh yeah. All right. Clyde, I would want to bring you in here. You see, we still have got to remember that I think George started to talk about the different religions and whatnot, Christianity and the Muslim and whatnot. Some of those, I think in the Muslim religion, I speak under correction, I think that they may even be more severe than it is in Christianity. But where you would want to bring you in, Clyde, since we talk about the Bible and we do not omit what in the Bible, there is a passage of scripture, Clyde, I think somewhere around Romans, about chapter 3 or thereabout, where something is said for the government. And there we read about the rulers of the state. are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. They are the ministers of God.
Wow.
And these are there for the good of the people. And this is the Bible puts it. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid. For the rulers are God's avengers to execute wrath upon him who doeth evil. Now, would you like to put that in context of what we are talking about tonight? The authority to punish by death for death.
Well, first of all, the assumption by Paul was that all governments are supposed to be moral and just governments, which really isn't true. For example, here in the United States where I live, they're extremely religious, and yet you hear what's going on in the rest of the world. We think that the Muslims are something other than good people, and when you get into all the myriads of religious expressions, you get all of these variations. So, in theory, yes, but all governments are not good governments. And governments are supposed to do what we call the just thing, but they don't always do the just thing. And so, Paul at that point was being a purist. He was extremely positively objective, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he was right.
Oh, okay. Now, if we could just lean off the Bible for a moment, and I think Richard had mentioned something about barbaric behavior and inhumane and whatnot. Richard, when you consider that with the death penalty, the defendant is treated with dignity. You see, I am trying to talk about being unfair to them and this cruelty. It isn't. The defendant is treated with dignity. He is all right, yeah. He is considered innocent until proven guilty. Now, that is really going a long way, you know. He starts with an advantage. He does not go before a tribunal before he is offered the services of a psychiatrist to check on whether his thoughts are in order. Does he suffer thought disorder? All of this is gone into before he goes into before proceedings to determine that he is fit for things and what was his state when these things took place. And they are taken into consideration, and if it is found that he was in a way irresponsible because of some stress or something, it augurs well for him. So, I mean, again, here is dignity that is given to him. He is afforded a legal practitioner for his protection and defense. A jury of his own countrymen to be a part of the judgment team. I mean, everything is done for him. And when we look at this, how could we talk about it being barbaric? I mean, he has committed a crime commensurate with death. And it is a death penalty. It is not to be considered a deterrent. It is a penalty that he is paying for the crime he committed. It had nothing to do with me to deter me from doing anything. I've done nothing. I'm not on trial. And you've gone all the way and given him a feather pillow on which to lie and sit while all this is going on. If he fails his exam, he does not get a pass. If he passes his exam, okay, he comes out with his degree or whatever. How do you respond, Richard?
What about in the case of a juvenile?
A juvenile? Well, I don't know that juveniles are executed here. Depends on what do you call a juvenile? What's your age range for a juvenile?
Under 18, but my simple point is not the definition of a juvenile.
Mm-hmm.
But if we apply your logic, then everybody is going to be put to the sword.
Oh, no, I don't think so. To whom much is given, much is required. I mean, we would not expect someone with Down syndrome, if they committed homicide, that you would go hang them. No,
why?
That's reasonable. Huh?
Why not?
No, because it might be a case of diminished responsibility, and he's not to be held responsible if it's like that.
I would like to come in here. Our legal system, Richard raised a very interesting point here. Our legal system sometimes could overlook these issues. Sometimes a person, I don't know, I am not in the courts. I don't want to speak out the terms here. But there are certain situations that does not take into consideration, that we don't take into consideration when people commit a crime. In terms of the upbringing of this individual, the type of environment they would have come from, the state of mind, how they would have been when the time they would have committed this crime, and all these things. And if you have poor legal representation, sometimes these little things can be overlooked. This is my humble experience in some of these issues, that in terms of the legal systems, I don't believe that there is a level playing field in terms of representation, and I would certainly like to hear Richard respond to this in certain criminal matters, certain crimes that one will that a crime somebody and that afforded the defendant. Our legal system certainly has to. I'm speaking from a humble point of view here, just from a man in the street and how I would have seen things, not from any great experience that I would have had in the court or anything like that. I don't want to venture that, but it will look that way to a lot of people like me. That if, for instance, there was a case where a famous case at one time where the justice minister was involved in here in this country, and where the young individual was on trial. However, the prosecution, the defendant lawyer was able to claim that the doctor was not qualified. The doctor who performed the pathologist was not duly qualified. So therefore, his report or statement that he would have given would have been inaccurate, something to that effect. Now, from my point of view, I don't believe that kind of legal representation will have been afforded to the, what you might call the quote-unquote normal man or common man in the streets, But whether I agree with the death penalty abolition or not, I don't think we should abolish, I don't think we should abolish the death penalty. If one don't commit a murder, well, then there is no reason to even talk about the death penalty. You just don't commit a murder, and then you have nothing to worry about. That's how I see it.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I can jump in and ask the question, what about battered woman syndrome? Battered woman syndrome, if you are saying, well, if you don't want to get the death penalty, don't commit a murder. But battered woman syndrome, as the law stands now, can be used as an issue of provocation.
Yes.
And provocation in itself is not a complete defense to murder, but it could reduce a murder charge to manslaughter.
Oh, I have nothing against that. I have nothing against that. You see, we are not saying, Richard.
But what?
Richard,
let him finish. I want to hear.
go ahead.
But the thing is, if we are going along the logic of the non-abolition of the death penalty, and we are saying that he who kills should be killed, then there is no room. There is no room for this battered woman syndrome. There is no room.
Yeah, there is just
sense of provocation.
No, there is justification for defending yourself, Richard.
And Richard, what I would like to add to what George is saying is this, that you see, the point is this, I want you all to tell me clearly, do we take the Bible and throw it through the window, or do we deal with it? It is one or the other. And in the Bible, we are reading, which you and some people have accepted as God's word.
John.
What
Go ahead.
about people who commit adultery?
You mean,
What does the
but
Bible say we should do?
But the Bible all says that there's a life for a life. I mean, when you commit adultery,
adultery. If we are saying that we should implement the teachings of the Bible, then we should be selective.
But wait a minute, and I think I'd better ask Clyde this. Is there something, Clyde, this is your expertise, you tell us as a minister of the gospel, is there a difference between God's law and the Mosaic law?
Well, let me go back and answer the other question first. It was the death penalty was punishment for the commission of some crimes. Murder was one of them, and adultery was another. The Mosaic law was, first of all, they were an adaptation of the Hammurabi Code, but they were intended to produce stability and moral governance in society. That's what they were intended to do. Like, don't steal, etc., etc. And Moses was inspired, as he had these from the Lord, to govern the behavior of that ancient Israeli society.
What I want to know is, because Richard has asked a question which needs to be answered. We are saying that the Bible upholds death if you take a life. And God said, now did God say that if you commit adultery, that you should die as well? Or was that a law made by the people?
Well, you remember the story of the woman caught in adultery with Jesus, because they were putting Jesus to the test, where the text did say that you should be stoned for committing adultery. And first of all, adultery is something that had to be committed by two people. And it was really a test of where Jesus was standing on that discussion. And he let the woman go.
God said, Jesus said, we know that story, but would you, is there anything in the Bible where we would know that Jesus would have acted the same way if somebody had committed murder?
I don't know. The Levitical code is what.
Anything there?
No, I just want to say something quickly here. Is that, John, if a government or legislators, when they drafted laws or enacted legislation, they have to take into consideration that the kind of society we live in. You cannot go into the Bible and read the Bible and enact legislation according to what is laid down in the Bible. Now, I am not saying that nothing is wrong with that. I am saying that the legislators have to remember that the society that they live in is not really a Christian nation or such. Is a society that, and I'm speaking here for particularly in Trinidad, because you keep quoting the Bible, and nothing is wrong with that. But what I will tell you, John, it may have other views besides what is in the Bible.